Think about the psychological makeup of a person who not only commits the violent crime, but also does it with a calculated goal of erasing knowledge. What kind of deep-seated need for domination and secrecy drives a person to such an extreme form of intimidation? This person isn't just a killer, they are a keeper of secrets, turning murder into a psychological message. Welcome. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I don't just talk about the crimes. I talk about the psychology behind the crimes and the mysteries that captivate us. We look beyond the facts of the case to understand the why of the crime. Subscribe and like this video if you want to learn more about the mental health and psychological indicators of true crime cases like this one. Is one of the most compelling examples of how a crime can be less about immediate rage and more about maintaining absolute power through fear. It's critical to remember here that I'm not offering a formal diagnosis of any individual. All of my analysis is based on public facts and my professional interpretation of psychological and behavioral indicators within the context of the crime. These are my speculations, not a diagnosis. The most powerful psychological angle in this case doesn't start with the victim, Sister Cathy. It begins with the calculated psychological torment inflicted on those around her after she vanished. The strongest and most compelling mental health indicators we see in this alleged actions tied to the case is a profound manifestation of psychopathic traits, particularly the need for total control and the utter lack of empathy required to perform an act of extreme intimidation. We have credible accounts that suggest the perpetrator sought to instill a deep, lasting fear in victims. This goes beyond the initial violence of the crime itself. A former student alleged that shortly after Sister Cathy's disappearance in November 1969, a suspected perpetrator, a priest named Father Joseph Masco, who served as a chaplain and guidance counselor at the high school, took her to see Cathy's body. This was before the body was officially discovered by police in January of 1970. Sister Cathy had been a popular teacher who taught English and drama at the high school. She was known to be a trusting and approachable figure. Former students, including Teresa, later alleged that they were sexually abused by Father Masco at the school. It is widely suspected that Sister Cathy became aware of these horrific acts and was preparing to expose them, making her a threat to the established order. This trauma was so significant that for decades, survivors remained silent, bearing the weight of the secret. The student eventually described the shared burden, saying, "We are the keepers of the secrets," referring to the survivors who had stayed silent for years due to fear and intimidation. The alleged act of showing the student the body of the woman who was perceived as a protector and then issuing a direct, chilling warning. You see what happens when you say bad things about people. This is a textbook display of sadistic control and narcissistic rage. This tactic is not simply about revenge. It's about establishing total psychological dominance. It aims to create trauma so profound that the victim self-silences for decades. This perpetrator was not just hiding a crime. They were actively working to contain a secret by psychologically breaking anyone who knew it. This is a pattern far more indicative of psychopathic traits than a sudden impulse crime. The environment in which these alleged crimes took place at Catholic High School in Baltimore required the perpetrator to operate within a trusted, respected social role. This points to a deep well of antisocial personality disorder indicators characterized by manipulation, deceit, and a superficial charm designed to exploit others. The individual suspected, Father Masco, was not just a teacher, but a priest and a counselor. His position gave him unquestionable authority and access to vulnerable students and staff. He was a figure of moral and spiritual guidance, served as a perfect, impenetrable mask of sanity behind which to hide his predatory behavior. Sister Cathy disappeared on the evening of November 7, 1969, after leaving her apartment in Baltimore to run errands, including buying an engagement gift for her sister. Her car was later found parked strangely and covered in mud near her apartment building, suggesting a struggle or a forced journey to an off-road location. The ability to live a public life of spiritual service while allegedly engaging in systematic abuse and a subsequent cover-up demonstrates an extreme level of duplicity and narcissistic entitlement. The perpetrator exhibits a grandiose sense of self, believing they are exempt from moral and legal boundaries. The veneer of respectability is a key component of the psychological defense mechanism. It's a tool used to attract victims, evade suspicion, and maintain the very power structure needed to continue this cycle of abuse. This calculated and sustained deception aligns strongly with psychopathic and narcissistic indicators. The victimology clue here. In mental health profiling, the victim's choice often reveals the motive. Sister Cathy was 26 years old at the time, was not a random victim. She was a threat to the perpetrator's carefully constructed world. When a perpetrator targets someone within their inner circle who has discovered their secret, the motive is purely preservation and elimination of a psychological adversary. Her death was less likely about personal animosity and more about maintaining the systematic abuse and secrecy around it. Was teaching at Western High School while living in an apartment in Baltimore with a fellow nun. This period of living outside a convent suggests a personal search for a new direction, perhaps even a sense of moral urgency. Her decision to act on the information of abuse was a clear act of conscience. The individual responsible saw Sister Cathy not as a person, but as an obstacle or a vector for exposure. This depersonalization is a core defense mechanism of a sociopath or one antisocial personality disorder. They prioritize their own needs and freedom over the life of another. The blunt force trauma to the head was an excessive means of silencing. It reflects a rage not simply at the victim, but at the potential exposure and the resulting loss of control that Sister Cathy represented. The violence served to ensure the secret died with her. The placement and condition of Sister Cathy's body 2 months after her disappearance offer crucial behavioral clues that point toward an organized, psychologically motivated offender seeking to control the narrative. Sister Cathy's body was found on January 3, 1970, in a dumping area in Maryland. The decomposition over 2 months suggests the body was concealed, then moved or simply left in an area where discovery was eventually probable, but not immediate. The initial investigation into the missing Sister Cathy was hampered by a lack of immediate evidence. Her car being found early the next morning provided the first concrete clue, yet the location where her body was found was miles away in a secluded area. The time between the act and the discovery provided the perpetrator with a psychological buffer. If the body was moved, that secondary action indicates a cool, calculated state of mind, rather than a disorganized crime, suggests a final act of contempt and dehumanization. For a perpetrator with narcissistic tendencies, the victim is disposable, and the effort to hide the body was purely an exercise in self-preservation. The delayed discovery gave the perpetrator time to construct their cover story, observe the police investigation, and ensure the ongoing psychological control of the abuse survivors remained intact. This entire sequence suggests a criminal with a strong executive functioning and the ability to maintain composure under extreme stress, pointing away from traits like schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder, and firmly toward the calculating nature of the psychopathic spectrum. Every clue in this case, from the abandoned car to the horrific psychological abuse allegedly inflicted on those students, comes full circle to a single terrifying motive: the maintenance of a system of power and abuse. The body's final resting place was a symbolic statement of dehumanization, but the aha moment comes from the alleged testimony of Jean. The perpetrator did not just kill, they used the death as a psychological tool. This shift from the standard unsolved murder to a case about systematic cover-up and psychological warfare provides the deepest insight into the perpetrator's mind. The murder itself was just a means to an end. To sustain intimidation was the true psychological crime. The perpetrator's deepest fear of losing control over his secret of abusing the students and his elevated social standing. The elimination of Sister Cathy was a desperate attempt to protect his narcissistic supply, his victims, and his carefully crafted public persona. He was a priest, and he wanted people to look up to him so he can abuse more students. This profile rules out the simple schizoid personality or person suffering from abandonment issues as the primary driver. The actions are too methodical, too focused on power and manipulation. This is a calculated work of someone, even a priest, who views people as tools and secrets as currency. The survivors, who carried the knowledge for so long, truly understood the deep psychological cost of being the keepers of the secrets. The Sister Cathy case is a powerful lesson in the deep, long-lasting trauma of institutional betrayal and the psychology of secrecy. It underscores how a person with psychopathic traits, even being a priest, can leverage a position of trust into inflict immense harm, and how their ultimate motive often comes down to protecting their self-image and their continued access to power. The victims, the survivors, and Sister Cathy herself were all casualties of the malignant narcissism that demanded absolute, terrifying silence. I want to point out here, I know it could be a controversial issue when we talk about priest and child abuse. It happens a lot, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't mean that every priest is an abuser. So please don't think that this is against the Catholic Church or the priest or any church in general. I'm just pointing out behavior doesn't necessarily look obvious. Sometimes it's in the most trusted person. If you're interested in exploring more psychological cases like this one, be sure to watch my next video. And if you enjoyed my mental health breakdown of this case, please subscribe to this channel for more videos like this one. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.